5. The Book of Ghusl, Washing of the Whole Body. Chapter 1. The Performance of Ablution Before Taking a Bath. 185. Narrated Aisha radiyallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Whenever the Prophet took a bath after janaba, he started by washing his hands and then performed ablution like that for salah. After that, he would put his fingers in water and move the roots of his hair with them, and then pour 3 handfuls of water over his head, and then pour water all over his body. 186. Narrated Maymuna radiyallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet. Allah's Messenger performed ablution like that for salah, prayer, but did not wash his feet. He washed off the discharge from his private parts and then poured water over his body. He withdrew his feet from that place, the place where he took the bath, and then washed them, and that was his way of taking the bath of janaba. Chapter 2. Taking a bath by a man along with his wife. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet and I used to take a bath from a single pot called farak. Chapter 3. Taking a bath with a sa' of water also. 1 sa' equals 3 kilograms approximately. Narrated Aisha that she was asked about the bath of the Prophet. She brought a pot containing about a sa' of water and took a bath and poured it over her head, and at that time there was a screen between her and the questioner. One 89. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah radiyallahu anhu. A man asked him about taking a bath. He replied, "A sa' of water is sufficient for you." A man said, "A sa' is not sufficient for me." Jabir said, "A sa' is sufficient for one who had more hair than you and was better than you," meaning the Prophet. And then Jabir put on his garment and led the salah prayer. Pouring water thrice on one's head. Chapter 4. 190. Narrated Jubair bin Mut'im radiyallahu anhu. Allah's Messenger said, "As for me, I pour water 3 times on my head," and he pointed with both his hands. Chapter 5. Starting one's bath by scenting oneself with hilab or some other scent. 191. Narrated Aisha, whenever the Prophet took the bath of Janaba, sexual relations or wet dream, he asked for the hilab. 5. Book of Ghusl. Some of a scent. He used to take it in his hand, rub it first over the right side of his head, and then over the left, and then rub the middle of his head with both hands. Chapter 6. Having sexual intercourse and repeating it. 192. Narrated Aisha that she used to put scent on Allah's Messenger, and he used to go round his wives, and in the morning he assumed the ihram, and the fragrance of scent was still coming out from his body. 193. Narrated Anas bin Malik. He said the Prophet used to visit all his wives in a round during the day and night, and there were 11, and in another quotation 9 in number. I asked Anas, had the Prophet the strength for it? Anas replied, we used to say that the Prophet was given the strength of 30 men. And Sa'id said on the authority of Qatada that Anas had told him about 9 wives only, not 11. Chapter 7. Whoever scented himself and then took a bath, while the effect of scent remained, even after bathing. 194. Narrated Aisha, it is as if I am just now looking at the glitter of the scent in the parting of the Prophet's head hair, and while he was a muhrim. Chapter 8. To rub the hair thoroughly while taking a bath. 195. Narrated Aisha, whenever Allah's Messenger took the bath of Janaba, he cleaned his hands and performed ablution like that for prayer, and then took a bath and rubbed his hair till he felt that the whole skin of his head had become wet. Then he would pour water thrice and wash the rest of the body. Chapter 9. If someone, while in the mosque, remembers that he is junub, he should leave the mosque to take a bath and should not perform tayammum. 196. Narrated Abu Huraira radiyallahu anhu. Once the call, iqama, for salah, prayer was announced, and the rows were straightened. Allah's Messenger came out, and when he stood up at his musalla, he remembered that he was junub. Then he ordered us to stay at our places and went to take a bath, and then returned with water dropping from his head. He said, Allahu Akbar, and we all offered the salah prayer with him. Chapter 10. Whosoever took a bath alone in seclusion, completely naked. 197. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, the people of Bani Israel used to take bath naked altogether, looking at each other. Prophet Moses, alayhi salam, used to take bath alone. They said, by Allah, nothing prevents Moses from taking a bath with us, except that he has a scrotal hernia. So once Moses went out to take a bath, and he put his clothes over a stone, and then that stone ran away with his clothes. Moses followed that stone, saying, my clothes, O stone, my clothes, O stone, till the people of Bani Israel saw him and said, by Allah, Musa has got no defect in his body. Moses took his clothes and began to beat the stone. Abu Huraira added, By Allah, there are still 6 or 7 marks present on that stone from that excessive beating. 198. Narrated Abu Huraira, the Prophet said, When Prophet Ayub, Job, was taking a bath, naked, golden locusts began to fall on him. Ayub, Job, started collecting them in his clothes. His Lord addressed him, O Ayub, haven't I given you enough so that you are not in need of them? Ayub replied, Yes, by your honor, power, but I cannot dispense with your blessings. Chapter 11. To screen oneself from the people while taking a bath. 199. Narrated Hani bint Abi Talib radiyallahu anha. I went to Allah's Messenger in the year of the conquest of Mecca and found him taking a bath while Fatima radiyallahu anha was screening him. The Prophet asked, Who is it? I replied, I am Hani. Chapter 12. What is said regarding the sweat of Junub and a believer does not become impure. 200. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet came across me in one of the streets of Al-Madinah, and at that time I was Junub. So I slipped away from him and went to take a bath. On my return, the Prophet said, O Abu Huraira, where have you been? I replied, I was Junub, so I disliked to sit in your company. The Prophet said, Subhanallah, a believer never becomes najas, impure. Chapter 13. A Junub can sleep without taking a bath, but with ablution. 201. Narrated Umar bin al-Khattab radiyallahu anhu. I asked Allah's Messenger, Can any one of us sleep while he is Junub? He replied, Yes, if he performs ablution, he can sleep while he is Junub. Chapter 14. When male and female organs come in close contact, bath becomes compulsory. 202. Narrated Abu Huraira. The Prophet said, When a man sits in between 4 parts of a woman and did the sexual intercourse with her, bath becomes compulsory. Six. The Book of Menses. Chapter 1. Menses, a thing ordained by Allah Ta'ala and instructions for women. 203. Narrated Aisha. We set out with the sole intention of performing Hajj, and when we reached Sarif, a place 11 kilometers from Mecca, I got my menses. Allah's Messenger came out to me while I was weeping. He said, What is the matter with you? Have you got your menses? I replied, Yes. He said, This is a thing which Allah has ordained for the daughters of Adam. So do what all the pilgrims do, with the exception of the tawaf, circumambulation around the Kaaba. Aisha added, Allah's Messenger sacrificed cows on behalf of his wives. Chapter 2. The washing of the husband's head and the combing of his hair by a menstruating wife. 204. Narrated Aisha, while I was in menses, I used to comb the hair of Allah's Messenger. 205. Narrated Aisha, when the Prophet was in the mosque, in the state of itikaf, he would bring his head near her in her room, and she would comb his hair while she used to be in her menses. 206. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet used to lean on my lap and recite the Quran while I was in menses. 207. Narrated Salama radiallahu anha, while I was lying with the Prophet under a single woolen sheet, I got the menses. I slipped away and put on the clothes for menses. He said, "Have you got nifas, menses?" I replied, "Yes." He then called me and made me lie with him under the same sheet. Chapter 5. Fondling a menstruating wife. 208. Narrated Aisha, the Prophet and I used to take a bath from a single pot while we were junub. During the menses, he used to order me to put on an izar, dress worn below the waist, and used to fondle me. While in itikaf, he used to bring his head near me, and I would wash it while I used to be in my periods, menses. 209. Narrated Abdul Rahman bin al-Aswad, on the authority of his father. Aisha said, whenever Allah's Messenger wanted to fondle any one of us during her periods, menses, he used to order her to put on an izar and start fondling her. Aisha added, none of you could control his sexual desire as the Prophet could. Chapter 6. A menstruating woman should leave observing fast. 210. Narrated Abu Sa'id al Khudri, once Allah's Messenger went out to the Musalla to offer the Salah prayer of Eid al-Adha or Al-Fitr prayer. Then he passed by the women and said, O women, give alms, as I have seen that the majority of the dwellers of hellfire were you, women. They asked, why is it so, Allah's Messenger? He replied, you curse frequently and are ungrateful to your husbands. I have not seen anyone more deficient in intelligence and religion than you. A cautious, sensible man could be led astray by some of you. The women asked, O Allah's Messenger, what is deficient in our intelligence and religion? He said, is not the witness evidence of two women equal to the witness of one man? They replied in the affirmative. He said, this is the deficiency in your intelligence. Isn't it true that a woman can neither pray nor fast during her menses? The women replied in the affirmative. He said, this is the deficiency in your religion. Chapter 7. The itikaf of a woman who is bleeding in between her periods. 211. Narrated Aisha, once one of the wives of the Prophet did itikaf along with him, and she was getting bleeding in between her periods. She used to seize the blood from her private parts, and she would perhaps put a dish under her for the blood. Chapter 8. Put in perfume by women at the time of taking a bath after finishing from the menses. 212. Narrated Atiyah radiallahu anha, we were forbidden to mourn for a dead person for more than 3 days, except in the case of a husband for whom mourning was allowed for 4 months and 10 days. During that time, we were not allowed to put kahal, antimony, eye powder in our eyes, or to use perfumes, or to put on coloured clothes, except a dress made of asp, a kind of Yemen cloth, very coarse and rough. We were allowed to use kust asfar, very light perfumes, at the time of taking a bath after menses, and also we were forbidden to go with the funeral procession. Chapter 9. A woman should rub her own body thoroughly during a bath after the menses. 2:13. Narrated Aisha, a woman asked the Prophet about the bath which is taken after finishing from the menses. The Prophet told her what to do and said, purify yourself with a piece of cloth scented with musk. The woman asked, how shall I purify myself with it? He said, Subhanallah, purify yourself with it. I pulled her to myself and said, rub the place soiled with blood with it. Chapter 6. Book of Menses. Chapter 10. 6. The Book of Menses. Chapter 10. The combing of the head hair by a woman on taking a bath after finishing from the menses. 2:14. Narrated Aisha, in the last Hajj of Allah's Messenger, I assumed the ihram for Hajj along with Allah's Messenger. I was one of those who intended tamattu, to perform Hajj and Umrah together with breaking, and did not take the hadi animals for sacrifice with me. I got my menses and was not clean till the night of Arafah. I said, O Allah's Messenger, it is the night of the day of the Arafah, and I intended to perform the Hajj tamattu with Umrah. Allah's Messenger told me to undo my head hair and comb it, and to postpone the Umrah. I did the same and completed the Hajj. On the night of Al-Hasba, i.e. a place outside Mecca where the pilgrims go after finishing all the ceremonies of Hajj at Mina, he, the Prophet, ordered Abdul Rahman, Aisha's brother, to take me to the At-Tan'im to assume the Ihram for Umrah in lieu of that of Hajj at-Tamattu, which I had intended to perform. Chapter 11. A woman should undo her head hair while taking the bath after finishing from her menses. 2:15. Narrated Aisha, on the first of Dhul Hijjah, we set out with the intention of performing Hajj. Allah's Messenger said, anyone who likes to assume the Ihram for Umrah, he can do so. Had I not brought the Hadi with me, I would have also assumed the Ihram for Umrah. Some of us assumed the Ihram for Umrah, while the others assumed the Ihram for Hajj. I was one of those who assumed the Ihram for Umrah. I got menses and kept on menstruating until the day of Arafah, and complained of that to the Prophet. He told me to postpone my Umrah, undo and comb my head hair, and to assume the Ihram for Hajj, and I did so. On the night of Hasba, he sent my brother Abdul Rahman bin Abi Bakr with me to At-Tanim, where I assumed the Ihram for Umrah in lieu of the previous one. Hisham said, for that Umrah, no Hadi, fasting or alms were required. Chapter 12. There is no Salah prayer to be offered by a menstruating woman in lieu of her missed Salah prayers during her menses. 2:16. Narrated Muadda, a woman asked Aisha, should I offer the Salah prayers which I did not offer because of my menses? Aisha said, are you from the Harura? At in Iraq, we were with the Prophet and used to get our periods, but he never ordered us to offer them the Salah prayers missed during menses, or Aisha said, we did not offer them. Chapter 13. Sleeping with a menstruating woman, one's wife, while she is wearing her clothes that are worn during menses. 2:17. Narrated Salama radiallahu anha, I was lying with the Prophet under a woolen sheet when I got my menses, and added in this quotation that the Prophet used to kiss me while he was observing Saum fast. Chapter 14. The participation of menstruating women in the two Eid festivals. 2:18. Narrated Atiyah radiallahu anha, I heard Allah's Messenger so that the unmarried virgins and the mature girls and the menstruating women should come out and participate in the good deeds as well as the invocations of the faithful believers, but the menstruating woman should keep away from the musalla, praying place, salah prayers. Someone asked Atiyah surprisingly, "Do you say the menstruating woman?" She replied, "Doesn't a menstruating woman attend Arafah, Hajj, and such other deeds?" Chapter 15. Yellowish discharge is not important during the menses. 219. Narrated Atiyah, we never considered yellowish discharge as a thing of importance during a non-menstruation period. Chapter 16. If a woman gets her menses after Tawaf al-Ifada. 220. Narrated Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, I told Allah's Messenger that Safiya bint Huyah had got her menses. He said, "She will probably delay us. Did she perform Tawaf al-Ifada with you?" We replied, "Yes." On that, the Prophet told her to depart. Chapter 17. The offering of a funeral prayer for a woman dying during or after delivery and its legal way. 221. Narrated Sumara bin Jundab radiallahu anha, the Prophet offered the funeral prayer for the dead body of a woman who died during delivery, i.e. childbirth, and he stood by the middle of her body. Chapter 18. 222. Narrated Maimuna radiallahu anha, the wife of the Prophet, during my menses, I never offered salah prayer, but used to sit on the mat beside the mosque of Allah's Messenger. He used to offer the salah prayers on his sheet, and in prostration some of his clothes used to touch me. 7. The Book of Tayammum. Rubbing of hands and face with clean earth in the absence of water. Chapter 1. And you find no water. 223. Narrated Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, we set out with the Prophet on one of his journeys till we reached Al-Baida or Datul Jaish. A necklace of mine was broken and lost. Allah's Messenger stayed there to search for it, and so did the people along with him. There was no water at that place, so the people went to Abu Bakr radiallahu anhu and said, "Don't you see what Aisha has done? She has made Allah's Messenger and the people stay where there is no water, and they have no water with them." Abu Bakr came while Allah's Messenger was sleeping with his head on my thigh. He said to me, "You have detained Allah's Messenger and the people where there is no water, and they have no water with them." So he admonished me and said what Allah wished him to say, and hit me on my flank with his hand. Nothing prevented me from moving because of pain, but the position of Allah's Messenger on my thigh. Allah's Messenger got up when dawn broke, and there was no water, so Allah revealed the divine verses of Tayammum. So they all performed Tayammum. Usaid bin Hudayr said, "O family of Abu Bakr, this is not the first blessing of yours." When the camel on which I was riding was caused to move from its place, and the necklace was found beneath it. 224. Narrated Jabir bin Abdullah radiallahu anhu, the Prophet said, "I have been given 5 things which were not given to anyone else before me. 1. Allah Ta'ala made me victorious by his frightening my enemies for a distance of 1 month's journey. 2. The earth has been made for me and for my followers, a place for offering salah, prayer, and a thing to purify, perform tayammum. Therefore, any one of my followers can offer salah prayer wherever he is at the time of salah prayer. 3. The booty has been made halal, lawful to me, yet it was not lawful to anyone else before me. For I have been given the right of intercession on the day of resurrection. 5. Every prophet used to be sent to his nation only, but I have been sent to all mankind. Chapter 2. The performance of tayammum by a non-traveller is permissible when water is not available, and when one is afraid that the time of salah prayer may elapse. 225. Narrated Abu Juhaym al-Ansari radiallahu anhu, the Prophet came from the direction of Bir Jamal. A man met him and greeted him, but he did not return back the greeting till he went to a mud wall and rubbed his hands and his face with its dust, performed tayammum, and then returned back the greeting. Chapter 3. Can a person blow off the dust from his hands in the performing tayammum before passing them over his face? 226. Narrated Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anhu, I said to Omar bin al-Khattab, remember that you and I became junub while both of us were together on a journey, and you didn't offer salah prayer, but I rolled myself on the ground and offered salah prayer. I informed the Prophet about it, and he said it would have been sufficient for you to do like this. The Prophet then stroked lightly the earth with his hands, and then blew off the dust and passed his hands over his face and hands. Chapter 4. Clean soil is sufficient for a Muslim as a substitute for water for ablution if he does not find water. 227. Narrated Imran bin Hussein al-Khuzai radiallahu anhu. Once we were travelling with the Prophet, and we carried on travelling till the last part of the night, and then we halted at a place and slept deeply. There is nothing sweeter than sleep for a traveller in the last part of the night, so it was only the heat of the sun that made us to wake up, and first to wake up was so-and-so, and then so-and-so, and then so-and-so, and so the narrator said that Abu Raja told him their names, but he had forgotten them, and the fourth person to wake up was Umar bin al-Khattab, and whenever the Prophet used to sleep, nobody would wake him up till he himself used to get up, as we did not know what was happening being revealed to him in his sleep. So Umar got up and saw the condition of the people, and he was a strict man, so he said Allahu Akbar and raised his voice with takbir, and kept on saying loudly till the Prophet got up because of it. When he got up, the people informed him about what had happened to them. He said, there is no harm, or it will not be harmful. Depart. So they departed from the place, and after covering some distance, the Prophet stopped and asked for some water to perform the ablution. So he performed the ablution, and the call for salah prayer was pronounced, and he led the people in salah prayer. After he finished from the salah prayer, he saw a man sitting aloof, who had not offered salah prayer with the people. He asked, "Oh, so-and-so, what has prevented you from offering salah prayer with us?" He replied, "I am junub, and there is no water." The Prophet said, "Perform tayammum with clean earth, and that is sufficient for you." Then the Prophet proceeded on, and the people complained to him of thirst. Thereupon he got down and called a person. The narrator of added that Abu Raja had named him, but he had forgotten, and Ali and ordered them to go and bring water. So they went in search of water and met a woman who was sitting on her camel between two bags of water. They asked, "Where can we find water?" She replied, "I was there at the place of water this hour yesterday, and my people are behind me." They requested her to accompany them, so she asked where. They said, "To Allah's Messenger." She said, "Do you mean the man who is called Wasabi with a new religion?" They replied, "Yes, the same person. So come along." They brought her to Allah's Messenger and narrated the whole story. He said, "Help her to dismount." The Prophet asked for a pot. Then he opened the mouths of the bags and poured some water into the pot. Then he closed the big openings of the bags and opened the small ones, and the people were called upon to drink and water their animals. So they all watered their animals, and they too all quenched their thirst, and also gave water to the others. And the last of all, the Prophet gave a pot full of water to the person who was junub, and told him to pour it over his body. The woman was standing and watching all that which they were doing with her water. By Allah, when her water bags were returned, they looked like as if they were more full of water than had been before. The Prophet ordered us to collect something for her. So dates, flour and sawiq were collected, which amounted to a good meal that was put in a piece of cloth. She was helped to ride on her camel, and that full cloth of foodstuff was also placed in front of her. And when the Prophet said to her, "We have not taken your water, but Allah has given water to us," she returned home late. Her relatives asked her, "Oh, so-and-so, what has delayed you?" She said, "A strange thing. 2 men met me and took me to the man who is called Wasabi, and he did such and such a thing. By Allah, he is either the greatest magician between this and this," gesturing with her index and middle fingers, raising them towards the sky, indicating the heaven and the earth, "or he is Allah's true messenger." Afterwards, the Muslims used to attack the pagans around her abode, but never touched her village. One day, she said to her people, "I think that these people leave you purposefully. Have you got any inclination to Islam?" They obeyed her, and all of them embraced Islam. Eight. The Book of As-Salah, the Prayer. The Book of As-Salah, the Prayer. Chapter 1. How As-Salah prayer was prescribed on the night of Al-Isra, miraculous night journey of the Prophet to Jerusalem and then to the heavens. 228. Anas bin Malik said that Abu Dhar radiallahu anhu narrated that Allah's Messenger said, "While I was at Mecca, the roof of my house was opened, and Gabriel descended, opened my chest, and washed it with Zamzam water. Then he brought a golden tray full of wisdom and faith, and having poured its contents into my chest, he closed it. Then he took my hand and ascended with me to the nearest heaven. When I reached the nearest heaven, Gabriel said to the gatekeeper of the heaven, 'Open the gate.' The gatekeeper asked, 'Who is it?' Gabriel asked and said, Gabriel. He asked, 'Is there anyone with you?' Gabriel replied, 'Yes, Muhammad is with me.' He asked, 'Has he been called?' Gabriel said, 'Yes.' So the gate was opened, and we went over the nearest heaven, and there we saw a man sitting with us with a large number of people on his right, and us with a large number of people on his left. When he looked towards his right, he laughed, and when he looked towards his left, he wept. Then he said, 'Welcome, O pious Prophet and pious son.' I asked Gabriel, 'Who is he?' He replied, 'He is Adam, and the people on his right and left are the souls of his offspring. Those on the right are the people of paradise, and those on his left are the people of hell.' And when he looked towards the right, he laughed, and when he looked towards his left, he wept.